All right. All right. Well, we'll just forge ahead anyway, and I'll send them the slides, Paul, so you can have everybody for the upcoming annual meeting, if they want to look at some of that stuff. So, anyway, thanks everybody for joining. I got a couple of presentations today, and that's pretty much going to be the bulk of what we talk about. So I usually open it up at this point to the association if they want to give us any updates on anything, but I don't think anybody's here from the association other than Paul, and his microphone is not working. So I think we will have to just skip over that part. Any recaps? They have their annual meeting coming up in May at the beach that they usually have. We're not going to be there this year. So the update here is what I'll forward to them, and if they want to use any of this, they can. Rules and legislation is the next one. We're still going forward with the readoption of the O2S rules that I've talked about, I think, in several meetings prior. Next Thursday, sorry. We have the EMC meeting where they take up the O2S rule readoption. It's a very convoluted process where we have to keep going there, asking permission to do this and this and this. So it's kind of, I think, confusing because everybody's like, well, I thought you already went there like 2 other times. This time the rules went to the Rules Review Commission, and this is basically just to go to the EMC and ask for approval on the schedule going forward. It's very weird. We're still like maybe, let's see 2 years out from a readoption. It's just a very long, convoluted process. I think the timeline has readoption May of 2027. So in between now and then, we do a few things like prepare a fiscal note, which we don't really have any fiscal impacts. Draft the final rule, which if there's any changes, those would be included. It goes to public notice again. So there's just more steps going on. The big thing is, if everybody remembers, there were 2 rules that we were going to deem as unnecessary. And the public comment period happened for that, where people were allowed to comment only on our decision to make them necessary or unnecessary. We got 1 comment that disagreed with our decision and said that they should all be necessary. So the process for that was to put them back in as necessary going forward. But then when we do a final rule and go to public comment on the final rule, we can ask for those rules to be repealed, officially repealed. And that's what we intend on doing. We may get public comment again that they don't like that, but there's ways for dealing with that going forward. And one of the things we have to demonstrate is that we did talk to stakeholders about this, and that we all did have discussions about it, and that the stakeholders support our decisions. So I wanted to make sure and just briefly go over that again, just to make sure that everyone still understands what we're talking about here and is still on board with that. So let me share my screen real quick.
Yolanda?
Yes, we can hear you.
I put in an earpiece and that seems to work. I'm not sure what was going on, but I am here, and I don't know why the others haven't shown up.
Huh. Yeah, I don't know if something was wrong with the invite or what was going on, but yeah. All right, so you should be able to see this for the O2S rules. I just wanted to go through that again real quick. to make sure everybody remembers what we're talking about. The two rules we decided were unnecessary was this one was the first one. 0302 was other potentially responsible parties. Basically, it said after we receive a petition, we can notify other responsible parties and we may request from any potentially responsible party different information. We decided this was unnecessary because we don't need this. We don't need a rule to do this. When people give us a petition, they give us the information that we need. Since we're a voluntary program, they want to come into the program because it's a benefit to them. Then it is, a benefit to them to give us the information we need. And it's part of the petition process for us to review that information. So basically, this is just something that we don't use. We don't need it to get information that we need to certify sites and move forward with petitions. So this was one of the ones we said there's really no reason to have this in here. So the comment we got just said, oh, we think you should leave this in there just in case. And we're like, well, there is no in case because we don't need to. They give us the information to get in or they don't. So anyway, that's one. The next one, well, this is partly why we, deemed it not necessary. We just don't need a rule to do that. They're eager to cooperate and we can refuse to accept them in the program if they don't give us information that we need. So the other rule is 0507, which was remedial action plan. When these rules were written, we didn't have the risk program going. We didn't really know what that was going to look like. So originally it was in there that, anytime there was contamination, we needed to have a remedial action plan that spelled out how they were going to address the contamination. But let me go. This is a long rule. I'm not going to make it. We categorized it unnecessary because, as I said, when the risk-based rules were actually implemented, we don't really use remedial action plans. Everything we need is in a risk management plan that spells out how we will manage contamination and close sites out under land use restrictions. So if we do any remedial action, it's just done on an interim basis to address a source area removal or an interim action because there's an emergency. And for those, we don't need a full remedial action plan. So we don't really need this rule at all. We in all the years I've been here, I think I've seen one RAP, and that was very early on in the program. We just don't use this. So I'm trying to do the right thing, what they want when we do these rule update things, readoption. They want us to actually look at the rules and take out the ones that are just kind of there for no reason. So in the past, we found it easier just to keep adopting the rules as is, and then you don't have to go through any of this. But I was actually trying to do the right thing this year and take these out since they are not used and are not necessary. So we will see how that is going forward. But does anyone have any comments, concerns, anything about taking these two rules out? Because if not, we're going to just forward with trying to get them repealed, and we'll see how that works. So, all right, if nobody has any comments on that, I'll move forward. The next thing are the site statistics. Let me get that up here. Okay. Everything is holding steady. I won't read all of these, but everything has stayed very consistent, which is good. Our revenue into the fund is still roughly 2 million, between 2 million and 2.4 million a quarter, which is what it has been, and it continues to remain that, which is good. the fund balance, you'll see like currently we have almost 14 million in the fund, but encumbered in contracts, we have 34 million. And people might ask, how is that possible or what's going on? But just to briefly explain, what happened was the fund was building up and building up, building up while we didn't have any new contracts to put the money in. The existing contracts were already maxed out at their maximum we could put in. So the fund balance was building up and until I got new contracts in place. And then once I have new contracts, I can start putting money over there in those contracts, even though they're still working off of the previous contract. Those haven't been spent down and finished yet. So basically, the new contracts are just getting funded so that the money is, sort of semi-protected in contracts until they switch over to the new contracts, start spending that money. So it's good. We have a reserve. And Billy keeps a sharp eye. We keep an eye on the balance and the spending so that the fund is sustainable for years to come. Because we do have quite a surplus of money, we are going to look at doing a bunch of remediation projects, a lot more high dollar things that we kind of hold on to, and parse out, kind of trying to watch our spending. But we're going to go ahead and do a bunch of those now to spend some money. So that will be coming. The site statistics, we continue to see sites trickle into the program. So we got 4 new sites certified this past quarter. This quarter went from December or January 1st to the end of March. They're trickling in. 2 more sites closed in that quarter. We continue to see the number of active dry cleaning facilities. And I say that with the caveat, they're the ones that we track. So it's a regulated solvent, perc or petroleum or an alternate. So things that we track only. We continue to see that decline. We lost 4 more this past quarter. And that some of that is switching to different solvents that we don't track. So it's not necessarily that a facility is closing, it's that it's not subject to the compliance program any longer. So all that is kind of doing what we expect it to do. We still have 323 facilities that are subject to inspection in the compliance program. So does anybody have any questions about statistics or budget numbers? All right. All right. The next thing is I'm going to turn it over to Billy just briefly to go over any remediation unit issues or updates that he wants to share with the group.
Okay, I'm gonna try to be brief, but I do want to. Anytime we do something like this, I want it to be meaningful, and so I want folks to see that the things that we're actually doing, and we're doing a lot when you sit down and start to think about it and put it on paper. So I'm just gonna go through a few things that we're doing, what we've done since the last stakeholder meeting, and if anybody wants like a list or I can provide it to you after the meeting. Just let me know. But as I've discussed previously, VIMS is kind of taken over with respect to like preliminary source removals, which is DSCA's remediations, because they cost so much and because inhalation exposure is our direct exposure pathway that we have to address the most frequently. And since the last meeting, we've installed VIMS at a commercial structure, 1 residential structure. We've got pilot testing at 2 commercial structures. We have air purification units that were deployed at a commercial structure where the logistics and the infrastructure are keeping us from installing a permanent mitigation system, but we're keeping them in there as a temporary measure until such time we can do that. And then we've also identified another building at a grossly contaminated site at a distribution facility where VIMS will be installed. We're also evaluating preliminary source removal / remediation at that location as well. So outside of VIMS, which is a mitigation, the preliminary source removals under O2S are our remediation, like I just said. So since the last stakeholders meeting, we performed a excavation at a coastal garment care down in Jacksonville, and we excavated gross levels of contamination, and for our program and for risk-based remediation purposes, we consider that soil that's saturated with perc, and there's a concentration that's associated with that based on just some calculations on physical and chemical properties. But anyway, the concentrations were so high they had to be incinerated. But it was really neat project to work on because it was Wawa. Well, I say neat. Anybody that worked on it knows it was a labor of love. But you got Wawa coming in. We're excavating ahead of the redevelopment, so we were facilitating that and discussions with hazardous waste section because there was a lot of soil moving going around, things like that. They over excavated our excavation, so we worked together with our subcontractor to minimize cost to both parties, and it was just overall successful, and it probably put the site in a good position to close out eventually. So that was a good example of like a successful preliminary source removal. We've got a soil vapor extraction system authorized for one facility that has some sensitive receptors inside. Indoor air is kind of back and forth, and we had to do a tier 3 evaluation to make sure that they weren't exposed to unsafe levels. But this is a really good system installation on behalf of the program and the people in that building. And in another of our sites where we have a TC, immediate action level exceedance, we installed a VIMS, and sometimes the best engineered systems, they just don't meet the need for that specific structure based on our conceptual understanding or conceptual site model of vapor intrusion. So the next step for that one is to actually remediate the soil and the vapors beneath the building so that we can have a permanent reduction in indoor air concentrations. So that's all that's occurred since our last meeting. We've also issued vapor intrusion guidance for the DSCA program, which is that was another labor of love, and everybody had input and an opportunity to comment within the DSCA program. Worked with Hart and Hickman to really develop it, but then the DSCA project managers and each contractor had an opportunity to comment. But we've got some kind of new strategies and ways of looking at things, so we've modified our approaches to adjust to the temperature, I guess is one way of saying it, of the national regulatory framework, or like what other states are doing and the state of the science, and to make sure that we're adequately evaluating that exposure pathway inhalation through vapor intrusion to make sure that folks aren't being um, exposed to our contamination sites at unsafe levels. Um, Another part of that was administering long-term monitoring requirements based on the concentrations that were observed. And that has actually shown to be more meaningful because as we go back and look at some of these structures where we've observed high concentrations of PC, TC, and soil gas, we found that some of those structures need VIMs. And that's actually something we expect to kind of see moving forward. Um, Guidances that have been updated, public outreach guidance, soil characterization guidance, site closure procedures, cost proposals and invoicing procedures, TC immediate action level guidance. And the last one is IDW procedures guidance. And IDW is investigative derived waste. All of our investigative derived waste is hazardous waste because, as y'all know, it's contaminated with spent dry cleaning solvent, which is under RECRA considered a spent halogenated solvent, which is FW2 hazardous waste. And there's all kinds of tracking and management requirements. And under the limited power of attorney that we have with each petitioner, it gives us the authority to manage permits and things like that on their behalf so that we're in compliance with all state and federal rules and regulations. And this is kind of a continuation of that. And so we're transferring that. Scott was doing that for a long time, but it's just so much to track, and we have so many sites across the program. We released a guidance, and Scott worked really hard on that. So that each contractor can actually track the hazardous waste as it's generated, through and documented through manifests, and pay the fees on behalf of the petitioner and all that kind of stuff. So it's really good because having that guidance document, the program, regardless of staff or contractors moving forward, that's a function that will be sustainable for forever. So that was a really big step. And just as Delonda already went through the closure statistics, but I just want to just kind of, this is what my expectation was moving forward under the current climate and everything that we're state of the science is 5 to 10 closures a year. So this year we've had one closure. We have 3 closures forthcoming in the next 2 months. We have 2 risk management plans that are going through the final draft and 3 that are under development. So that so my best projection for this year is that we'll have 6 closures, and based on the risk assessments that we have right now, there should be at least 6 closures for next year as well. So we're on target there, and so sites are continuing to close, so that's a positive thing. Like another thing that Delana said was given the fund status and everything, we're kind of opening up our preliminary source removals. So last week I sent out an email to contractors to basically submit any site that they felt met the criteria under O2S 0504, I think, or I can't remember, 504. I think that's it. Wait, no, it's on my wall. 0505. For preliminary source removals, which is it's DSCA's remediation, but like under the rule, it's when you don't have an imminent hazard condition present, it gives you the option to remove stuff, which is why it's called a preliminary source removal. It's not like absolutely necessary. And Delana was talking about removing that remedial action plan stuff. That's wise because we, as a program, we carry our remediations out through the 0504, excuse me, 0505 preliminary source removal rule. And we do it, and it's a really effective way to get things done. But anyway, so they're going to be submitting all those within the next 3 weeks. And by July 1st, Londa and I, with the feedback of DSCA project managers, are going to authorize a bunch of those to be implemented in the fiscal year 25, 26. All right. I'm going fast, or I'm trying to go fast, but the last thing I just want to talk about is DSCA program is now participating in something called EQUIS. That stands for Environmental Quality Information System. It's something that's been used by DEQ, DWM primarily to get PFAS data in for groundwater. And since the division is kind of every program in some way, shape, or form is having to address PFAS. So every program is being asked to become functional at the use of EQUIS. And with us having been a state lead program and having environmental contractors who submit that data on our behalf and on your behalf, we were really in a good position to move that forward really quickly. And PRLF was kind of a forerunner to us. That's pre-regulatory landfill. That's also part of our branch under Delana's management state lead program, a lot like ours. Well, loosely speaking, but so anyway, it's a way for us to collect our data, submit it electronically, um, and then have it show up. We have, because all of our data, there's locations associated with everything we do. Lat longe for soil, soil gas, groundwater, water supply wells, everything. But for right now, we're starting small and we're just going to be submitting location data first for all sites across the program from groundwater monitoring wells. And then anytime we do groundwater assessment, monitoring, collect groundwater data at all, we're going to be submitting that. Our contractors are going to be submitting that through something called an electronic data deliverable, which is just a platform, a standard platform by which data can be submitted through a spreadsheet and uploaded into this system effectively. And the system actually has some checks on it, so it can do some QA/QC on your analytical data, tell you if that's good or not, and kick it back to you and give the contractor an opportunity to resubmit that. But anyway, that was a lot. But we've done, and I'm glad it was a lot because it means that we've done a lot of work since our last stakeholders meeting. And I just wanted to share a little bit of all the work that everybody's done within the DSCA remediation unit so y'all be proud. I'm just saying, but I mean, really, we've done a lot, and we're a lot of these things are. I mean, they're gonna carry us a long way, the program a long way, and put us in a good position moving forward. So, big thank you to everybody that's a part of the DSCA team for participating in that and input and all the creative, collaborative work that we've done to get where we are, and we just keep on doing what we're doing, and that's it.
All right. Thank you.
Welcome.
Chris and Brian are on here now, so obviously something was right. Chris and Brian, I don't know if you were here at the beginning. If you have any NCALC updates, I kind of skipped over that because Paul was the only one here. Do you guys have anything you want to update the group on?
Yeah, hey, sorry about that. I'm still having a couple struggles, but I think I've got everything connected right now. Hey, Chris. So yeah, DSCA, we in our last meeting in January in Durham, we went over some of the stats that you guys had presented to us in November. We advised the dry cleaners there to get their voluntary petroleum checklist in, because I think you were still waiting for several of those at the time. Let's see. We did renew our contract with McGuire Woods that will go through November of this year. Same terms. We spoke a little bit about the phase out of PCE, and obviously that had, I believe even at that point, the stay was in place in January for the TCE and PCE bans that had been that were going to become effective at the time. But that was pretty much where we were in the meeting there in February 1st there in Durham. Chris, you got anything to add?
No, I'm asked to hand everything over to Brian, and he's doing a great job for the association.
All right. Thank you. I will touch on a couple things. And I will send you, Brian, I'll send you the slides and stuff from this. We're not going to have anybody at your annual meeting, but I'll send you all this stuff in case you want to share that with everybody.
Absolutely.
All right. All right. Since everybody likes to look at the pretty little graphs, I was going to share with you the details or the statistics from the annual report that we just finished and will be given to the legislature if they haven't already gotten it, actually. So just a brief explanation, I guess. Well, let me just share and I'll start with that. All right. So the annual report is kind of weird. We're required to report to the legislature the efforts of all the waste management programs, and it's all put into one big report they call the consolidated report. Those are always available on our website if you ever want to have some sleepy bedtime reading. The report covers the previous fiscal year, so it's quite a time lag, which is always interesting, preparing a report from stuff that happened 6 months ago. The report that's submitted this year in 2025 covers fiscal year 23-24, which was July 1 of 2023 and ended June 30th of 2024. So we're almost a year past that already, but we're giving them the report on that previous year. So the statistics and the things I'm going to show you are what is in that report that was given to the legislature. So obviously those were the statistics as of June 30th, 2024. But I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of what we're showing the legislature. So just a reminder, our fund is made up wholly almost of sales and use tax. The other solvent tax and the petition reimbursement revenue we get is only about 3% of what we get into the fund. the funding history, this goes all the way up till that June of 30th, 2024. As you can see, the purple line is the fund balance. So we obviously had a big growth of it at the beginning before we had contracts and contractors. So the fund was building up and then we started spending. And now we're at that place where we kind of like to keep everything kind of in line, but we do have a little surplus of fund money, which is always a good thing. As I showed in the statistics, there's almost 14 million sitting in the fund right now, and I will be encumbering that into contracts next week. So I try to keep that number, we keep about 2 million available for administrative costs. The rest of it, we try to keep it in contracts. Nothing's ever safe, but it's safer, I guess, to say this is encumbered money. The solvent tax revenue, as we've all known, is kind of been declining over the years. I didn't do the entire history. I only went back 10 years. So this is like from 2015. As PERC is phasing out, the solvent tax, has been going down. These little weird blips you see were just because of a strange accounting thing that happened with the state, with the revenue coming in. It's been generally on this steady decline. But as you see, every once in a while, there's a little uptick. So the sales and use tax, on the other hand.
Oh,
go ahead.
Can I speak on that?
Sure.
Yeah, that's just change over from PERC to hydrocarbon. $10 a gallon versus $2 a gallon.
Well, and that's what we would need to bring up in a statute, in a change. Yeah.
No, I'm saying that's why the solvent tax revenue goes down over that period. Okay, is because once we got the fire code changed to where people could put in hydrocarbon machines without sprinklers, people started switching over very quickly to hydrocarbon and paying $2 a gallon tax,
right,
versus $10 a gallon tax on PERC. So we knew that solvent tax revenue would go down, and when they raised the state sales tax by 0.5% a few years ago, and we went from 4 to 4.5, that's more than made up for the decrease in the solvent tax revenue, keeping us, above $8 million a year coming in.
I thought you were suggesting let's do a statute change and put the $10 tax on hydrocarbon solvent.
Nope. No way.
Well, thanks for that. Yeah, explanation. That's absolutely correct. So yeah, the sales and use tax, as Chris just mentioned, that's gone up, and I still don't really understand how they calculate it, because we're in a broad standard industry code and they just take a percentage that they think is dry cleaning and apply that to what we get out of that sales and use tax category. But as long as they keep doing us right, then that's all that matters. So just to know where your money's going, contract payments for work compromises the majority of what we pay out, 77%. And then we have our administrative cap of 20%, which we're usually right up against that. And then we have a small percentage that goes out for paying for haz waste and county well permit fees. The administrative cap is 20% by statute, and we've managed to stay below that. We kind of sometimes get right up against it, but we're kind of holding steady, so that's good. As I mentioned, the number of facilities subject to inspection, that's regulated solvents that we inspect, continues to decline a little bit as people switch to other solvents, as we expect it to continue to do. A few of the compliance stats from that fiscal year, we did start off with 358 facilities and we ended with 331. We still continue to do outreach visits. There are some people buying dry cleaners that are new to the program, and our inspectors go out and help them understand what they need to do. They conducted 361 inspections that fiscal year at 343 facilities, so some required return visits. The compliance rate was 92%. And what that generally means is we look at the number of, we had to issue 55 checklists or corrective action letters for things that were noticed during the inspection. We don't necessarily call that a violation at that point. When we send out notice of violations, we consider those violations. The compliance inspectors, one of their jobs is to go out and inspect facilities that apply for entry into the cleanup program. If they're an active cleaner, we want to make sure that they are in compliance before we let them into the cleanup program. So our calendar mailing that year was 148 PERC calendars and 217 to the petroleum alternative solvent facilities for the checklist. And as Brian mentioned, we keep reminding people to send those in. The return rate on the self-inspection checklist is very low. It doesn't seem to be having the desired effect that we were hoping. So we may want to discuss that going forward. I'm not sure that it's doing what was intended, but we may just put, I mean, we still inspect the petroleum on alternative solvent facilities. It was just intended to maybe prioritize those inspections. But we're kind of not getting very many back. So we're kind of just back to square one of just putting all of them on the inspection schedule and just get to all of them like we do the PERC ones. So it may come to the point where we decide it's not worth it to do these mail outs of the inspection, the self-inspection checklist anymore. We don't want people to be doing extra work that doesn't need to be done, that's not helping the situation. So we'll talk about that in the future. Sites in the DSCA program. Currently, well, as of this date, there were 527 certified sites, 135 closed. As you saw in the current statistics, there's a few more than that, but this is what was reported to the legislature. So, and the percentage of sites in the program still is majority of abandoned sites where the cleaner is no longer operating. Just a graph visual of the known dry cleaning contaminated sites that we have. Everything, of course, you would expect to accumulate over time as the program continues to work on more sites. Some kind of remediation statistics. We still provide water to people, alternative water, temporary, or we connect people. So 25 sites we have provided water in some way, shape, or form. Vapor intrusion mitigations continues to be one of our top things that we do. 73 sites have had vapor intrusion mitigation installed. And active remediations, soil or groundwater remediation, 56 sites have had some type of remediation done. And I think that was it for the statistics. Just to show you what got reported to the legislature this year. I mean, this year, but for last year. Does anybody have any questions about that? And again, you can read the full report. I'll be on, I don't think it's finalized yet, so I don't think this one is up on the website yet. Right. All right. The next fun thing that I wanted to talk about was I mentioned in previous meeting that we are going to do a PFAS pilot study. That has been finalized and approved by the division, and we are moving forward with implementing that at this time. So I wanted to go over a little bit of that with you guys. I mentioned it in the previous meetings, but I didn't give too many details, but I'll kind of give you an outline of what this entails. All right. And so we all remember Florida did that study back in 2019 that looked at just the limited number of sites and how PFAS was showing up either in solvent or in waste streams or in groundwater. We are going to do a similar study here in North Carolina and do selected PFAS sampling. We can do this under the fund, under the statute, which authorizes fund expenditures for other activities reasonably required to protect human health and environment. They're only being spent at a certified facility. So under assessment and remediation agreements that we already have in place for these sites. 10 to 15 existing sites will be selected. The sites we will look at will represent a range of facility types, active versus, historical operations, with and without wet wash, laundry operations, and at least one solvent distribution wholesale facility. We'll look at a range of conditions, different parts of the state with different geology and hydrogeology, variable concentrations, really contaminated sites versus maybe less contaminated sites, and at least one petroleum site. We will avoid sites in the counties that are associated with Gen X and the PFAS contamination that's going on in that area. It'll just muddy the waters because we know there's a lot of PFAS contamination in those areas. So for now, we're going to avoid that. The sampling approach for each site that we select is going to be collecting a minimum of 2 groundwater samples. We're going to do it in one event. We'll try to couple that with a visit to already do other work to minimize costs. We'll collect a sample from an upgradient well and then one from the well exhibiting the highest solvent concentration in the plume. We'll collect samples to make sure everything is QA QC'd. So we make sure we're getting an accurate sample. We'll sample with the accredited EPA methods that are being used by the division and the agency for PFAS. There's a separate suite of chemicals they run for these sites in the counties with the Chemours contamination. We are not going to be doing that because we're not looking for Chemours PFAS signatures. We'll compare all those results to the MCLs for EPA, and then North Carolina has established interim maximum allowable concentrations for some PFAS compounds. We'll look at that and compare those. DEQ has what they're calling a PFAS signature tool. They've developed this and it's out there from a couple of other companies too in various ways, but it's a tool for evaluating PFAS signatures, which can help identify potential sources. Then they can look at compare all the samples and look at this signature and see if the PFAS signature is similar. It provides like a trend and a comparison. It's a pie chart based upon the different compounds. And here's kind of what it looks like. Just this only shows you the compounds that are in the pie. They just put in like 100, 100, 100 to have every compound show up just to show you the pie chart and how it looks. But when you put everything in, it's not going to look like this. It'll be it'll consolidate them, as I'll show you here in a second. So it'll look something similar to this. So it will group them like PFOAs, PFOS. It'll group the type of PFAS compound to give you a generalized look on a pie chart. So the way they will use this is something like this was an example where, they can look at the source and like if the source was right here, like 2, 3, and 5. So you can see how that pie looks. When they sampled wells over here, those pies don't look the same. So it's basically looking at patterns and trends to see like this kind of doesn't match the PFAS we found at the source. So then you can start looking for other sources like up here. Okay, some things are showing up here. So was there something else that happened over here for PFAS? So the tool in the study, we will put the data into the tool and look at these kind of trends also if we end up having to sample any types of wells. So if we're going to try to collect some samples from raw or spent solvent. The Florida study did find PFAS in some raw solvent. We're going to look at separator water, wet wash, discharge water, probably something out of the mister. We're going to try to look at different sources and see where the PFAS is kind of going through the process. We may collect an additional down gradient well to look at PFAS, like to look at degradation or transformation products, if that's coming out on the other end. There is a thing, called a total oxidizable precursor assay. We may do this to look at, there's PFAS precursors that may be converted to PFAS when they're oxidated. So some of those may be high at laundry facilities in past studies, so we may use that. Once we get all these results, if we have identified areas of PFAS above background, we're going to look and see if there's any water supply wells in the vicinity. We'll collect samples from those water supply wells. Based on those results, get a health risk evaluation like we do with any contaminated supply well. If it needs alternative water based on that recommendation from our toxicologist, then we will provide alternate water supply, or we will discuss it. There's a program I think we've all talked about called the Bernard Allen Fund, which gets funding to provide alternative water sources to people with impacted wells. So we will always discuss with them if there are funding sources for them to do that. If the PFAS we pick up does not seem to be related to the dry cleaning release, then we will refer that over to the Bernard Allen Fund to address the contamination in those water supply wells. We may sample surface water if it looks like those are threatened from PFAS contamination as we do sampling. So the future implications of the study, based on the study, we're going to look and see if PFAS is a significant concern at dry cleaning sites. And if it is, we will develop a strategy for moving forward with PFAS sampling. That sampling will always focus on water supply wells in the vicinity, people that are being exposed to the PFAS, drinking it. We are always going to have the goal of minimizing the PFAS related expenditures where possible. We'll use our existing monitoring well network to evaluate the PFAS plume. And we have a path forward with continuing to close sites with PFAS impacts, so we can manage that still with the risk calculator and under the risk-based closure process. So we don't anticipate at this time for it to be a huge barrier to closure. The timeline for this, Hart and Hickman is performing the study for us under their contract. We're currently in the phase of selecting those 10 to 15 sites. They're going to begin sampling in June, we hope, and then be evaluating the results from all those in the fall, and then give us a final report sometime later this year. And of course, when we get all that done, we'll be reporting all that back to you guys and having a presentation on that. Does anybody have any questions on the PFAS study? Chris?
Yes. Do you have a budget for the study?
Right now, it looks like it's going to be about $200,000. And the petitioners will not be paying these costs. They're not being they're not being attributed to the sites. They're not being charged to the site, so it doesn't figure into the copay. And Jenna, I don't know, Jenna is spearheading the project. I don't know if you want to add anything, Jenna, or.
I think you pretty well covered it.
All right. We will try to send DSCA compliance inspectors out on any of these facilities that are active facilities, where they're going to be doing this sampling. We are hoping to have cooperation in sampling the raw solvent and things like that. So we're hoping the inspectors are there to help facilitate that, where we have to sample the waste streams and things in an active cleaner. Chris, did you have something else? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Do you have a hypothesis of what you think you'll find? Do you think you'll find that dry cleaning contributes, that laundry contributes, or that neither contribute to PFAS issue?
Personally, I think we're going to find it, but I don't think it's going to be a major source. It's just compared to all the other sources of PFAS that are issues. Dry cleaners are pretty low down on the list of activities that generate a lot of PFAS compared to all the other problems. So I think we're going to find it, but I don't anticipate it being very high concentrations, but that's just what I think. I would assume we're probably going to find something similar to Florida, but I'm not sure. I mean,
how about Jenna? What do you think, Jenna?
I think the same thing. I mean, looking at the Florida study, they did find it in the spent solvent, and they found more in the spent solvent than the spent wet wash discharge, but it wasn't super high. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's like Delonda said, I think you can look at tiers of contamination, and if you've got like these AFFF firefighting sites, like those sites have many orders of magnitude higher than a dry cleaner. So it seems like this is definitely not the worst PFAS problem in the state, I think. But again, that's just my opinion. It'll be interesting to see the data and if it confirms the same thing the Florida study showed, or if it shows something different, because that was a pretty limited study.
yeah, and I mean, I think, in the setting too, I mean, they're finding this, in septic systems everywhere. So if we're in a rural area with a lot of septic systems, the background sample may be higher than what we find down the gradient of the dry cleaner. I mean, it's just gonna depend, but those are the kind of things we want to look at and say, well, dry cleaner is not a contributing source because it's already there from all these other sources. So, yeah, well, it'd be
And
interesting.
you are going to sample, I think I saw you are going to sample the incoming water to the plants. Okay.
Yes.
Because not all treatment plants are able to filter it out. So some comes in and then it picks it up out of the clothes from dyes and finishes. And then the effluent carries, tiny bits out more.
Yeah.
Okay.
So more to come on that for sure. I realized I skipped right over compliance unit updates because I don't really have much. I already talked about the petroleum checklist. They're just continuing with inspections. Trying to think. We have one particular facility where we've been working for quite a while now on getting violations. We were at the penalty phase of that. But we're working with that individual to avert the penalties, hopefully by, we have concerns that the contamination is impacting maybe neighboring residents. So they're going to do a assessment and come into the cleanup program if there are impacts. And so we're trying to, for the better good of the program and for the surrounding people, trying to just get them to do the assessment find out if there are impacts and come into the program before we move forward with the penalty. So we're working really hard on that. I know Rachel's been doing a lot of work on that. So I don't have many other compliance updates. I think Rachel and John are on here. So if you guys had anything you wanted to bring up.
I don't. John, do you?
I don't have anything to add, no.
Okay. All right. Well, that kind of covers everything that was on the agenda. We're at the other issues. Is there anything anybody wants to bring up or discuss other than what we've talked about today? Okay. Well, then our next meeting would be, I guess, around the 1st of November. Let me look at my calendar. Hopefully by then we'll have some results from the PFAS study and we'll talk about that. So I don't know, how is everybody on Thursday, November 6th?
I've got a conflict. Could we back it up to October 30th, maybe?
Sure. October 30th, anybody? All right. We'll put that down as the tentative date then. And if you guys want to try a hybrid meeting, we can do that next time. There may only be about, I don't know, maybe 10 people there in person, but we can do that if you want, and try the electronics. Haven't had to use the new the system in the conference rooms, but we can try to do that next time. Try a hybrid meeting, see how it goes.
Sounds good.
All right. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Dwayne. Thanks.
Thanks.
All right.
See y'all. See everybody.